described every experience I've had when I've tried to just sit down and practice mindfulness or try to learn about it. I feel like I just come away feeling like a failure and feeling frustrated.
I'm just going to throw this out there. Is that not just an attempt to get the benefits of exercise without actually moving?
Practicing mindfulness regularly will make those 3 breaths more effective because you've rewired your brain to know, oh, okay, we're supposed to relax now.
I kind of want to talk again, getting into the mindfulness aspect because, I've seen a lot of the literature. Mindfulness seems to help. And you kind of touched on this earlier, Cami, where some of the stuff we're talking about can, at least according to the literature, who knows if it's a placebo or whatnot, and how much that comes into play, can significantly impact short-term health outcomes like mental health. Obviously, weight and stuff would be in there, and those are more objectively known. But I kind of want to attack mindfulness a little bit here. Not because I don't think it works, but because we just talked about this example of David kind of getting both at the same time, mindfulness and meditation. And mindfulness, correct me if I'm wrong, in recent years seems to be like the hot thing. We have apps like Headspace and Calm, who I've done some research for, that are really taking advantage of that market. And it really exploded when the pandemic came about. But is that not, I'm just going to throw this out there, is that not just an attempt to get the benefits of exercise without actually moving? Because it's like, oh, I want to get like the same clear head that David gets from going on his runs, but I want to do it in my chair. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to get up and move. So is there utility in trying to get people to create meditation habits, or are we just better off saying, get outside and go for a walk and you'll start meditating on your own automatically? Go for a run, you'll start meditating, go to the gym and like just clear your head, and that is meditation enough. So is meditation like still something we should promote? Or what are your thoughts? Am I crazy?
You're not crazy. I 100% believe there's a place for mindfulness and meditation in our lives. If someone gave me both choices of getting out and going on a walk or sitting and practicing mindfulness for 10 minutes, I would say get out and go on a walk. Like, you're going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But mindfulness can be practiced throughout the day. If you're in a meeting and you're starting to get a little worked up or stressed about something, you can take 3 deep breaths and you are practicing mindfulness and no one even knows about it. Like, it's a way to calm your sympathetic nervous system, is to practice mindfulness, and it helps us refocus. If we look at like our fight or flight responses, our primitive brain, we go into our primitive brain when we feel any kind of stress or threat. It's part of the stress cycle. And then we're able to use less of our higher functioning thinking skills, our important parts of our brain that make the best decisions. We go into our primitive part of our brain and we become reactive. And so if we can practice mindfulness, regardless of the situation, we can make better decisions. So a lot of times people think, okay, I need to sit down, I need to close my eyes, I need to breathe for 10 minutes. And yes, that is a type of mindfulness. That's a type of meditation. But we can harness the benefits of mindfulness for 20 seconds, 30 seconds throughout our day. I, like David, like to do the whole mindfulness zone out during physical activity when I'm out in nature, because mindfulness is just about being able to be in the present moment.
Right.
And so if we can be in the present moment, we're going to use our wise mind, if I can quote Dr. Marsha Linehan with DBT, and use our rational and our emotional minds, put them together and make better decisions. So yeah, I'm not saying we should ever replace physical activity with mindfulness. They can coexist. I just think mindfulness is more useful in our conversations, when we're feeling a little stressed. And in terms of the stress cycle, physical activity is the number one intervention to break the stress cycle. Because if you look at fight or flight, if you go back to if you're being chased by a bear, you run away, and then the threat's over, and you used your body to get away from the threat. Well, most of the threats in our lives right now, the stress in our lives, we can't just get away from. But we can break the stress cycle and close the loop with physical activity because we are imitating running away, basically. We're using our bodies, right? So we get to close the loop on the stress cycle, and maybe 20 minutes later, we're feeling stressed again. That's why little activity snacks can be really helpful throughout a stressful day. Is if you can't close the loop on the stress cycle, at least on a daily basis, it just builds up over time. And like I said, it's useful to use mindfulness and to use physical activity. And breathing is the second most effective way to break the stress cycle. But movement is the first.
So I wanted to ask just a quick follow-up there for people who might not know some of the stuff you're talking about. Could you explain kind of in more detail, if you would, this parasympathetic versus sympathetic nervous system and the fight or flight response and what those are when it comes to stress, just so we make sure we all understand?
Yeah, your sympathetic nervous system is it's your fight or flight system, and when it activates it like you've got epinephrine, cortisol, all these hormones that activate your body to get ready to fight or flight. And in chronic stress, we continually are activating that sympathetic nervous system. So if we can find ways to dive into the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's our rest and digest nervous system, it gives us a way to feel a lot calmer and to decrease those responses in our body. Does that answer the question? You might be able to answer that better than I can.
No, I think that was good, because I want people to think hopefully about this in more application-based terms. I think you nailed it, so that's great. Thank you. David, you look like you were going to say something.
I do have a question. So you kind of alluded to this earlier. So, I suffer through a lot of meetings through my day. And it's not been unheard of for some of those meetings to make me more than a little irritated. So as a way to kind of combat that, if I were to practice this mindfulness, be able to kind of, collect myself, take a few deep breaths, no one on the call is any the wiser, I feel better. Would spending 10 minutes a day trying to practice mindfulness, will that increase my ability for those 3 deep breaths to be more effective during those frustrating calls? Or would it just, is it more just a matter of practicing those 3 deep breaths on a regular basis? What are ways to improve that I guess that would be the parasympathetic nervous system activation that you just referenced?
Yeah, that's a good question. So regular mindfulness or meditation practices, so like 5 days a week for 10 minutes a day, have been shown to actually restructure the brain so that stress is less likely to interfere with the way our brain functions. Like we're less reactive to anxiety. So yes, practicing mindfulness regularly will make those 3 breaths more effective, because you've rewired your brain to know, oh, okay, we're supposed to relax now with these 3 breaths. So yes, it's a great way to train your brain. I recently saw a study where they compared different types of breathing to see which type was most effective at reducing stress, and it was cyclic sighing is what it was called. So you inhale, you pause, and then you inhale again. So it's like 2 inhales. and then you exhale out your mouth. A long sigh.
Yeah.
So it's inhale, pause, inhale, and exhale, sigh. So,
I noticed that my kids do that when they're kind of calming down after crying. They'll often do a double inhale. Yeah. Is that the same mechanism that's going on?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
Interesting observation.
Interesting. I don't know if you know this, but some of my initial undergraduate studies as well as graduate work were focused on neurobiology. And so I spent way too much time learning about how the brain works. The brain works through, it perceives cues, and then that kicks off some type of pathway. It's a lot of times how it works. And it seems like what you're describing is we need to teach the brain that those breathing segments, whatever they are, if there's something hardwired to it, or maybe it's just learning a cue, we need to teach the brain through the mindfulness that this is, okay, I'm turning on, it's time to calm down now. So we can teach it through that cue, just maybe a double inhale right there, just as we are, in a frustrating moment. And that will kick off the parasympathetic nervous system pathways. Does that kind of match your understanding?
Yeah, 100%. We're just training our brain to know that when we do this certain behavior, we want this parasympathetic nervous system to kick in and calm us. Because when you start practicing mindfulness, it might take a while for people who are just starting to feel calm. They might not even feel calm the first time they practice for 10 minutes. It might be frustrating. And that's what's the important part of mindfulness, is just accepting the present for what it is. Okay, I'm frustrated. That's okay. This is my first time doing this. And being able to sit with any kind of emotions, feelings at that moment with non-judgment, because we are our worst critics. Like that internal critic in our heads, it can just go 100 miles an hour. And being able to sit with who we are and how we feel and without judgment, and then eventually be able to just think more on the side of calm and gratitude, and then those automatic positive feelings start to show up a little easier when we can practice any of this stuff and get better at it. Like if we practice thinking negatively, we're gonna think more negatively, especially since we have a huge negativity bias. Like it's just part of who we are, because it's part of that fight or flight thing too. We automatically see the dangers in our lives. So we have to shift our focus so that we can start to see the positives a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you just described every experience I've had when I've tried to just sit down and practice mindfulness or try to learn about it. I feel like I just come away feeling like a failure and feeling frustrated. And so that's good to hear. It's kind of motivating me to try again. But I think I was also learning that like running, it takes time to see the benefits, and that you just need to accept that and just grit your teeth and get through it, those early periods before you start seeing any kind of benefit.
Yeah.
So that's beneficial for me to know.
And I know I've been a little critical of mindfulness in this. I actually love it. I do it when I can. And I want to say, because the most important thing, and kind of the theme of this episode, if you will, is you have to kind of just do what works and continue to build habits that can last a long time, and start where you can. And there's probably a large chunk of people who unfortunately aren't doing anything for their health, or people who are just doing mindfulness. But if you're not doing anything, mindfulness is a great place to start to slowly introduce more of these physical activities. You might get into mindfulness, you might enjoy it, and then maybe you start enjoying it while you're on a walk, so it can be kind of a gateway into even more healthy practices. I just wanted to bring that up for people who might feel that mindfulness is a waste of time. It's not, and it can lead to good things. I have noticed, though, and this is something I wanted to bring up that's kind of interesting. When I attend a mindfulness class, for example, or am doing mindfulness practice, I notice that the demographics of the people who are there, and I've also seen this in research too. When I was doing research with Calm, we had data from Calm, which is a popular mindfulness app. The large majority of people who participate in mindfulness are females. Why is that? Why is it that like there's never men there? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing as well. I think maybe men think maybe it's a little woo-woo, maybe like yoga or, and once and there's different types of mindfulness, right? And so you can practice it differently. And maybe it's just that like they don't feel like it's going to benefit them or they don't want to take the time for it. I don't really know. I don't really know why there's more women than men. I think women are just more open to thinking and feeling emotions and maybe assessing them a little bit more. But I don't want to make any judgments on, how men feel about their emotions either.
Yeah. Huh. David, do you have any thoughts?
I don't know. I don't think about my emotions. So maybe that's just what the problem is.
Yeah. It's funny because I think, again, like I think there's a lot of benefit to doing it, taking some time for mindfulness. And anecdotally speaking, to what we were talking about earlier, I do feel like it's helped me have the ability to breathe in relaxation when I need to. You know what I mean? Like you're just talking about, like I can kind of get into that mindset and relax myself a little bit. And just a lot of it comes down to some of the breathing exercises and stuff. But I find it to be relaxing and kind of fun and a good stress relief, especially in more stressful days. It's just good to put your brain on pause for a little bit. But there is kind of like a weird aspect to mindfulness, and maybe this is why men don't like it as much, where you can see kind of the more yoga type practices, which is also another thing that is more you see more females doing, and it's kind of like the kind of like more prayer like type talk that maybe turns off certain demographics. And I kind of wish that mindfulness didn't get as much into that and was a little bit more focused on the health instead of this kind of a pseudo spirituality, if you will. You know what I mean? Like it's like almost like taken from that same like vein of yoga that aims to have almost like this this supernatural element to it. And I don't know, maybe that's why maybe that's not why. I'm just kind of like putting things out there.
Well, mindfulness is really about like being in the present moment and just noticing, and a simple way to practice mindfulness is just noticing your senses. Like, what do I feel with my skin, with my body? What am I hearing? What emotions am I feeling? And I think that when I teach mindfulness, I get more into like the philosophy side rather than like the spiritual side. And I think it's finding the type of mindfulness that resonates best with you, because there are different types of mindfulness. There are different ways of practicing mindfulness. Just breathing deeply is mindfulness. So we might have like this idea of what mindfulness and meditation are, sitting on the ground and alming. Yeah, that's a type of mindfulness, right? But praying is also a type of mindfulness.
Right.
There's lots of types of mindfulness. It's just being in the present moment and taking a step back from our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, and being able to assess them in a way where we're not so tied to them, because we get so caught up in our own thoughts and feelings, and realizing that our thoughts and feelings aren't necessarily facts. And that can be really eye-opening for people. Like, can I think about this differently? Is this thought a fact? Is this emotion a fact? Well, no, it's not. And that's where a lot of people can find out, okay, is this thing I'm thinking about myself true? Usually it's not true. It's just our perception. And we can assess relationships, we can assess our own thoughts, we can assess certain circumstances by just using mindfulness, because it gives us that opportunity to pause, gives our brain a moment to pause. Like we're always going. I think that's part of why it's hard to sit and do mindfulness or practice some kind of meditation. It's like, well, I'm not doing anything. Well, you're going to be a lot more focused once you're done not doing anything for 10 minutes. You'll be a lot more productive if you stop and don't do anything for 10 minutes. And I recently listened to a lecture. She's Dr. Jessica Payne. She's like a neuroscientist. She studies sleep. And she talked a lot about that, how sleep is so important and how naps can be so useful. But she talked about like nap proxies, like mindfulness or physical activity, and how we can recharge our batteries by using this sleep proxies throughout the day if we're not really a napper.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Well, I feel like I could just sit and talk to you and learn from you all day, but we're coming up with the end of our time. And Ryan, I wonder if you'd agree if this is a good time to go into the 1 minute for 1% to kind of learn what the bite-sized takeaway is.
Yeah, let's do that. So we've talked about a lot of things here, and now it's time to take everything we've talked about and turn it into something actionable that you can take home and do to hopefully improve your health by approximately 1%. So, Cami, let's turn it over to you. This is 1 minute for 1%.
Hey, my 1 minute for 1% is VILPA, Vigorous Intensity Lifestyle Physical Activity. VILPAs are 1 minute bursts of increased intensity activity that you just incorporate into your day. So a VILPA, for example, is you've got a bunch of grocery bags in your car and you've got to get them from your car into the house, and you've got about like 6 or 7 steps up, and you get all your grocery bags and you heave them because you don't want to have to make 2 trips. You heave them into your arms and you walk into the house and you are huffing and puffing by the time you get there. That's a VILPA. If you are going on a walk and you decide to just pick up the pace really good for about 1 minute, that's a VILPA. If you're mopping the floor and you've got a really dirty spot and you've got to really scrub it really hard for, 30 seconds or so, that's a VILPA. Anything that you can do that increases your activity intensity for a very short period of time. So 3 to 4 VILPAs per day can reduce the risk of premature death by about 40 to 50%. If you can get 11 VILPAs per day, it goes up to 50 to 65%. So that is my 1 minute for 1% suggestion.
Excellent. It really is kind of ironic that when we take these little bouts of time to focus on some kind of physical movement or mindfulness, which we talked a lot about, it actually can make us more productive throughout our day. It's like taking time away makes you more productive. Doesn't seem to make sense, but it's true. And if anything, the time you get added onto your life will be worth the few minutes that you take every single day. You just have to make sure that you're taking those little segments throughout the day to take care of yourself, and then you'll live longer.